we are spearheading constitutional review, the review of the 1992 Constitution. And we are having a series of seminars in these days to push that agenda. Last week we have Justice and Short delivering on the topic, the excessive powers of the president. And before then, or prior to that, we also hosted the majority and the minority leaders of parliament who made presentations on the topic, the 1992 Constitution of Ghana, the perspective of the legislature. Many people were here to raise the occasion. And also proud to that, we had even the one who is referred to as the father of the 1992 Constitution, Nana Dr. S.K.B. Asante, also taking us through the reflections of the evolution of the 1992 Constitution. Constitutionalism, multi-party politics, and development. And today, to chair the occasion, given the topic, and whatever is involved. And our chair is a Reverend Minister, a former Minister of State, a former executive officer of the Chamber of Mines, and the first woman to head an African Chamber of Mines. She is the board chair of Newmont Ghana Gold Limited and sits on over 20 boards in her personal capacity, personal and professional capacity. Yes. She is also a management consultant, management and communication consultant, and a professional counselor. She is politically very balanced and neutral, and has collaborated with the different political traditions of the country with the sole aim of advancing the cause of Ghana. She served as a minister. In 2006, she was awarded the Companion of the Order of Volta by His Excellency President John Agyekum Kufuor, again in recognition of her immense contribution to the mining industry. So, Madam Chair, this is your audience, and audience, this is your chair. When I come again, I will introduce other important dignitaries in our midst. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Distinguished persons here assembled. It is such a great privilege to be here. Honestly, if you ask me, I'll tell you I don't know why I'm here. Because I haven't found myself in the midst of such distinguished people like you. But you know, we're taught like a battery to be ever ready. So here I am. I feel really privileged to be a part of this afternoon's discussions when we are talking about the use of our natural resources for national development. It is critical that we discuss this issue very dispassionately and in greater depth than probably we're able to do today. It is my hope that after today, we would actually establish a small group of people who will delve in depth into how a nation as endowed as we are with natural resources can maximize the benefits thereof. This country is endowed not only with gold, not only with manganese, not only with bauxite. Our latest discovery is that we have lithium, which is used in battery making and so on. We haven't even explored the coastal sands, which may also contain a lot of minerals for us. We have onshore petroleum, which we haven't explored. We have potassium. We have feldspar. We have kaolin. These are all industrial minerals. And we have a mineral which we pay very little attention to, which is also extremely important for our development. That is clay. And clay is of different types in every part of the country. We know that constitutionally, our minerals have been held on behalf of the people by the president. It's not just this constitution. It's not only the 1992 constitution. We've always had that kind of thing. Naturally, the reason is that natural resources should benefit everyone. The critical problem we have is how we can turn our minerals around so that we could benefit from it from the backwards integration, forwards integration, how we can turn them into industrial products and so on. Because Ghana is preponderantly gold, the focus has been on gold mining. Because Ghana, from north to south, from east to west, is awash with gold. We have gold in the depths of the earth. We have gold in the surface of the earth. We have gold as alluvial sands in rivers. We have gold covered with what you call forest reserves. They are everywhere. The issue of maximizing the benefits from natural resources is an African-wide challenge, and the AU has got an Africa mining vision, which I think we should have copies of and study as we go forward, because the issue has always been maximizing the benefits. A number of things have been said. Do we want to change the constitution and decide that we will not let the head of state hold it in trust? Given our land tenure issues, are we not going to be at war, even between two families who sit on the same resource? Are we not going to have intertribal problems? Because every mineral traverses areas. Every mineral will traverse areas. So how would we constitutionally deal with this? One thing I do know is that all minerals can benefit a country if properly managed. And I think as a nation, it is time to dispassionately think about what we would like to use our minerals for. This would enable us not only to discuss how we want the minerals exploited, but it will help us decide what kind of industries we will derive, what kind of downstream industries we will derive, what kind of upstream industries we will derive from the exploitation of our minerals. But then mine is not to talk about these issues. Mine is merely to sit in the chair, warm it, so that the rest of us can listen to the distinguished speaker as he espouses what he thinks we should be doing. It's a privilege, and I hope that we'll have a very hearty discussion after the speech. Thank you very much for asking me to sit in the chair.
Yes, before we go into the presentation, there are a couple of people around here. At the tail end, on the table, the high table, we have Dr. Humphrey, a second. Yeah, Dr. Humphrey Ayimdake, President of AGI. Then we also have Honorable Ata Achia. Amen. Sorry, he is the chair of the Mines and Energy Committee of Parliament. Then let me skip the speaker for now. Then at the extreme end there, we have Professor Entry Danso. Then Honorable James, Honorable James Kuche Veji is also here with us. Then we also have Dr. Agridako of the University of Ghana, who is also the Director of Parliamentary Affairs. So he is also here with us. Then we have Honorable Kofi Ato also here with us. We have Mr. Nimako is also here, and the general. Oh yes, the MPP General Secretary is here. We also have the person of Mr. Ivor Greenstreet is also here with us. Then we have again, we have the Sheikh around, Sheikh Arimeyao Shaibu also with us. So these are the people, the dignitaries around. We are all welcome to today's program. Then we have Professor Right Honorable Mike OQUAYE, who is the chair of the Professor Mike OQUAYE Center for Constitutional Studies, and she is the able chair for today's program. So, sorry, is the speaker for today's program. So let's welcome the speaker.
Madam Chairperson, our national constitutions since independence have largely been directed by the exigencies of the time. The 1957 Constitution was a colonial legacy bestowed on us by the British. The 1960 Constitution emerged from Nkrumah's quest for achieving a monolithic approach towards building the nation state. The 1969 Constitution was a charter of liberty, listing in extenso fundamental human rights. The human rights provisions occupied pride of place in the 1979 and 1992 constitutions, as well as we focused on liberation from military dictatorship. Having become a free people, the current quest is, to my mind, economic independence for the nation and economic prosperity for Ghanaians. Notably, the structural weakness inherent in the fledgling center-periphery global economy, which we inherited, continue to haunt us. We continue to be producers of raw materials while we import virtually every consumable item. Our gold, diamond, bauxite, manganese, oil, etc. are controlled by foreign powers and the game of musical chairs continues. We need to interrogate this state of affairs and how our constitutional arrangement can help us resolve the pangs of the center-periphery syndrome and the quest for a new world economic order. Can certain constitutional rearrangements assist us to avoid going to the IMF the 18th time? This should be a very useful question. This paper does not pretend to have the answers, but at least it is a thought-provoking exercise to make us see what we can do to establish a new economic order for Ghana. In his last broadcast, our president correctly pointed out to us that our economic fundamentals are weak. Those of us who are constitution-minded want to think aloud how we could possibly make constitutional amendments to assist in the process. I am mindful of the argument that a number of issues need not be put in the Constitution, and that the American Constitution is not a big document, etc., etc. But we do not live in America. Their style of constitutional interpretation and application differs from ours. I want to refer, for example, to the matter of capping of judges. We want to cap Supreme Court judges, and I think it's a good idea. But at the same time, we have put in our constitution that every Ghanaian has a right of appeal to the Supreme Court over every case. The Supreme Court then becomes an ordinary appeal court and not the Supreme Court a la America. So we cannot cap like America. And if we want to cap like America, then we must make a court of appeal the essential last court of appeal, so that our Supreme Court can handle constitutional and allied matters. And then, of course, we cap the number accordingly. These are very useful things that, having looked at the real dynamics of the Constitution and how it is working in our circumstances, we have to re-examine, re-interrogate, particularly this evening with regard to our economic quagmire. The classic case, and I want to address this once more, because of the fact that people often talk, look at the American Constitution, it's a small document, so what? The classic case of Marbury and Madison in America was essentially a matter of interpretation by the U.S. Supreme Court, which led to the establishment of judicial review of executive and legislative action. This was not provided for in black and white in the U.S. Constitution. It is worthy of note that when our Supreme Court had the opportunity to do a Marbury against Madison, they did not travel that pathway. Hence, the elaborate human rights provisions under the 1969 Constitution, which ran across 1979 and 1992. The paper therefore calls for the tightening of the constitutional screws in Ghana if we want to promote economic development. In other words, we identify every lacuna and make sure that we provide also for them constitutionally, so that the provisions will bind all persons towards the pathway that we want to tread. Control of natural resources, economic rights and duties of states. Chapter 2 of the 1970 United Nations Resolution on the economic rights of nations over their natural resources is very instructive. It provides as follows. Chapter 2, Economic Rights and Duties of States, Article 1. Madam Chairperson, with your permission, I quote from that. Every state has the sovereign and inalienable right to choose its economic system as well as its political, social, and cultural systems in accordance with the will of the people without outside interference, coercion, or threat in any form whatsoever. Article 2. Every state has and shall freely exercise full permanent sovereignty, including possession, use, and disposal over all its wealth, natural resources, and economic activities. 2.2. Each state has the right: A. To regulate and exercise authority over foreign investment within its natural jurisdiction in accordance with its laws and regulations and in conformity with its national objectives and priorities. No state shall be compelled to grant preferential treatment to foreign investment. B. To regulate and supervise the activities of transnational corporations within its national jurisdiction and take measures to ensure that such activities comply with its laws, rules, and regulations and conform with its economic and social policies. Transnational corporations shall not intervene in the internal affairs of a host state. Every state should, with full regard to its sovereign rights, cooperate with other states in the exercise of the right set forth in this sub-paragraph. C. To nationalize, expropriate, and transfer ownership of foreign property, in which case appropriate compensation should be paid by the state, adopting such measures taking into account its relevant laws and regulations and all circumstances that the state considers pertinent. In any case where the question of compensation gives rise to a controversy, it shall be settled under the domestic law of the nationalizing state and by its tribunals, unless it is freely and mutually agreed by all states concerned that other peaceful means be sought on the basis of the sovereign equality of states and in accordance with the principle of free choice of means. Particularly, Madam Chairperson, this part of this international provision gives no person contracting for Ghana the power to accede to any provision in any contract by which we make foreign law the interpreting law in a contract, because we have that right universally recognized here that the host nation's law should be the applicable law. And yet sometimes we have difficulties and we want to know how best we can apply this to our own benefits. The United Nations resolution in this connection, we all remember, informed General Gaddafi's nationalization of oil in Libya and other developments which have taken place in some parts of the world. Norway. In a seminar speech delivered by Governor Olsen of Norway titled Managing Natural Resources, Lessons from Norway, and delivered in Mozambique on 27th March 2019, the presenter gave vital signposts for effective, honest, profitable, and mineral resource management. Sensible resource management based on a well-functioning democracy and long-standing and trustworthy institutions. Where these are not already existing, they must be established. With a clear conceptual understanding that the resources belong to the people, direct government / public participation must be established. Talking about indices, indicators by which we ensure proper administration, and perhaps we should have a constitutional basis so that it will guide, or not only guide, bind all players in subsequent years, having the Constitution as the fundamental document. The principle of extraordinary tax rate should be imposed on oil companies, as in Norway. It is currently in Norway 78%. While African nations own the gold, diamond, bauxite, manganese, oil, lithium, etc., we still wallow in poverty while foreign companies make windfall profits. We need to review the present situations to translate the natural resource in the ground to financial assets. In this, we are assisted by the UN declaration that had earlier been referred to. This national framework should have cross-party support. This Norwegian statesman strongly stated. Lithium. On 21st April 2022, Reuters reported that Mexico's Congress had approved of a bill championed by the president to nationalize lithium. The president has also vowed to review all active contracts to exploit the coveted battery metal. The underlying principle is that untapped lithium in Mexico should be developed only by a government-run company, not foreign or private miners. And at West, of course, a government-foreigner partnership, not a matter of ceding the metal to them. In this, the legislature invoked a clear constitutional provision that all minerals belong to the state. Notably, we must repeat this. In doing this, the legislature in Mexico invoked a clear constitutional provision that all minerals belong to the state. In other words, we can have constitutional arrangements that will give us the strength and the justification for realigning these provisions, contracts that we draw. A number of foreign mineral companies are protesting, but it will not go anywhere. Lands and natural resources in Ghana. Government lands allocation have been a subject of controversy in Ghana, like we all know, for many years. There is a need to depoliticize the situation. First, the membership of the Lands Commission and other allied commissions and institutions must be revisited to make the commission more independent. Second, the functions of the commission should be reviewed. Article 2571 says, all public lands in Ghana shall be vested in the president on behalf of and in trust for the people of Ghana. Article 2581 says, A, gives this function to the commission, and I quote respectfully, Madam, on behalf of the government, manage public lands and any land vested in the president by this constitution by any other law or any lands vested in the commission. There is a school of thought that the commission should not manage public lands on behalf of the president, but on behalf of the people of Ghana. There are certain glaring maladies regarding our natural resources which we must provide for constitutionally to compel compliance. Rwandan President Kagame has recently come out against the practice of African leaders giving tax concessions to mining companies and others. At the same time, our leaders remove or fail to apply subsidies which will benefit our local manufacturers. The entire concept of tax concessions must be re-examined. Concessions given since the commencement of the Fourth Republic should be looked at, and the best practices learned for future application. Article 268 of the 1992 Constitution provides as follows: parliamentary ratification of agreements relating to natural resources. That is what it describes as parliamentary ratification. Parliament must ratify, and that's where I have a little beef. 1. Any transaction, contract, or undertaking involving the grant of a right or concession by or on behalf of any person, including the government of Ghana, to any other person or body of persons howsoever described, for the exploitation of the any mineral, water, or other natural resource of Ghana, made or entered into after the coming into force of this Constitution, shall be subject to ratification by Parliament. 2. Parliament may, by resolution supported by the votes of not less than 2/3 of all the members of Parliament, exempt from provisions of clause 1 of this article any particular class of or transactions, contracts, or undertakings. Madam Chair, practice throughout the Fourth Republic has shown that when matters come before Parliament for ratification, it almost invariably means several years have gone by before the matter comes for ratification. In some cases, action will have been taken before ratification is sought. Parliament is often put in a difficult position, and certain approvals are made just to save the situation. We realize that the Constitution provides under Article 78(1) that, and I quote, ministers of state shall be appointed by the President with prior approval of Parliament. There's a difference between ratification and prior approval. This rendition is very strong. It means no person nominated by a president is a minister unless and until duly subjected to the process of prior approval and duly approved. Second, the National Development Planning, Madam Chair, I want to make that distinction clear so that in all our constitutional arrangements, we apply the appropriate physiology to attract the meaning that we really want. Because we have seen clearly that where it is prior approval, it is strong. And it must be done before any step can even be taken by the subject person involved. But when it is otherwise, it comes later for something that looks like a mere rubber stamping effect. And I can see my Deputy Minority Leader here nodding. It is really a problem that Parliament often have to grapple with, and which Parliament does not like at all. And you realize that in many cases, the intended powers for Parliament are actually diluted by some of these provisions, so that practically we are not giving them the powers that we intend to give to them. Second, the National Development Planning Commission and allied bodies should be national, independent, professional institutions. The tenure of the members of the commissions and chairpersons should transcend presidential tenure. And when we talk about presidential tenure here, we don't mean any particular president at any given time. We're talking about the presidency as we have. The tenure of the members of the commission and chairpersons to transcend presidential tenure, so much so that if they are having 6 years tenure, the one president will leave when they are still in office, and another president will come and meet them whilst they are in office. All these things help to ensure that they live to work for the institution and the nation and not for any particular person. They should have a 6-year tenure, I'm saying, for that matter. National institution institutional representation is recommended, whereby the relevant professional institutions will largely elect representatives who in turn will elect a chairperson. The president in office, when the time comes for such appointments, cannot appoint more than 2 persons out of about 9 members. The key expression here, Madam Chairperson, is professionalism and institutional representation. Rent seeking and politics. Our constitution must seek to address rent seeking tendencies, which in turn produce parasites and hangers on who parade the corridors of power and manipulate political leaders. The starting point is political parties themselves. The 1992 Constitution, for example, provides as follows by Article 5550, and I quote, respectfully, Madam, only a citizen of Ghana may make a contribution or donation to a political party registered in Ghana. This is to ensure, unquote, this is to ensure that politics in Ghana is not funded by money launderers and foreign elements whose ultimate interest is to control our natural resources or the importation of rice, sugar, oil, and allied commodities which undermine our national development. Whilst we are seeking to produce our own rice, there's a rice lobby which is powerful because they sponsor political parties. And for that matter, you and I cannot easily, as citizens, control them. And I'm saying that unless these lacunae are removed and or checked by constitutional provisions, we'll be laboring in vain in trying to check these maladies. And these have nothing to do with any political party or the other, but it has got to do with the political system. And like one commentator, analyst said, elections become political auction rather than elections to choose freely. In other words, if it is by auction and if we have to pay high monies to get nomination, for example, to parliament, then of course at the end of the day it is no more election but it is an auction. Once more, the screws must be tightened. The global nouveau riche must the global nouveau riche turn round and represent global interests in our gold, diamond, oil, etc., and get favors which are not in the best interest of Ghana or Africa, for that matter. Some are the controllers of the commodity supply chain who will never allow us to grow our own sugar, oil, rice, etc., as long as they can. So, ladies and gentlemen, we see the nexus between the control of our natural resources, the prevention of us also producing our own sugar and rice, and the political party system which gave rise to this provision that foreigners must not contribute, but which we did not carry to its logical conclusion. And we are saying in this paper that sanctions, in fact, rigid sanctions must be provided so that what we intended to do, but which we tinkered with and did not drive on to its logical conclusion, will be achieved. Once more, the screws, I'm saying, must be tightened. The global nouveau riche turn round and represent global interests in our gold, diamond, oil, etc., and get favors which are not in the best interest of Ghana. Some are the controllers of the commodity supply chain who will never allow us to grow our own sugar, to get our own sugar, oil, rice, etc. As we work towards tightening the constitutional screws, we should reconsider Article 5515 in detail, including the following. That article I've read. Foreigners should stay away totally from Ghanaian politics. A candidate who flouts this will be disqualified, whether from the parliamentary or the presidential election. There's no sanction, so it becomes only wishful thinking. These sanctions must be clearly provided for. Any foreign contractor, big or small, who seeks any contract or business with government must swear to an affidavit that he has not supported any political party financially. Of course, others will now try to find out whether he has or has not. And if it is later established that the affidavit is false, this will constitute an economic crime and very heavy sanctions will apply. We are just thinking aloud. We don't have all the answers. But can we have such arrangements that can act as a deterrent to that which we wanted apparently by that constitutional arrangement, but which we left hanging by the wording of the Constitution? Any Ghanaian who acts as a conduit for such a foreigner will be liable to heavy penalty for this economic crime. The law must be expanded to include Ghanaian businesses as well. Provisions must be made to limit monies contributed by individual Ghanaians. And as for Ghanaian businesses, why does a business want to contribute to political parties if it is not looking out for further profit in the future? These realities must be examined and the dangers identified and the remedies provided. State sponsorship of political parties and prescribed modalities must be considered again. And there are members in this room who will tell you how many seminars we have held in the past trying to provide state sponsorship of political parties. This must be re-examined again so that we keep moneycracy at its lowest ebb. Moneycracy has crept into our politics in the most undesirable manner. All honest politicians will tell you. This turn round to pollute the body politic and infect the national development as a whole. Contracts. Our contract management generally should be re-examined. There should be a contracts management board nationally under the Constitution. Ministers and officials should refer to this apolitical body all proposed contracts affecting the national purse must end there and be critically examined. In the history of the Fourth Republic, contracts have been entered into by ministers without the prior knowledge of the Honorable Learned Attorney General of Ghana. All regimes. The members of the board should be men and women of proven ability in the area of endeavor, ready to do a national service, nominated by their peers and with a tenure separate from that of the president. Human rights. In a development-oriented constitution, human rights must assume a broader posture. For example, the recent controversy over the granting of bail should be regulated by the Constitution. In the case of Martin Gbebu versus Attorney General, the Supreme Court opened the floodgates for granting bail. According to the Supreme Court of Ghana, the provisions under the 1992 Constitution allowed for bail for virtually every offense in Ghana. To my mind, this is not a developmental approach and must be reconsidered. Economic sabotage today, as we glaringly see with Galamsey, for example, should mean a new bail approach. Offenses which are economic and undermining the economic resources we have, including gold, oil, lithium, and other recovery efforts, should be clearly identified. In fact, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, if we come to look at our bail granting regime, and if it is the Constitution that so widely allows bail, then we need to reconsider it. Because when you are tackling economic crime, you must seriously have the tools to apply. Granting bail is a very important aspect of human rights. Nevertheless, when it gets out of hand, you find all manner of persons beating the law and flouting the law. And if that happens, then of course, law cannot be used as an instrument for national development. Food security, non-dependency, processing of our basic needs, we must find a way to make these areas of economic development part and parcel of the primary law of the land. Madam Chairperson, not too long ago, maybe rather long, Dr. Modibo Okran, who later became a Supreme Court judge, a brilliant scholar, whose thesis was Law in Aid of Development, and which was published as a locus classicus, made us really examine ourselves as the nature of the law if we want national development. I believe that we must revisit the concept if we want our nation to grow economically in such a way that we will not revisit the IMF in terms of our natural resources, in terms of our politics not being monocracy, and all allied areas that this paper has attempted to examine this evening. If we do that, I believe it will be a useful contribution to our national effort in this direction. I thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Prof. A brilliant insight, very provocative words from the former speaker on this laudable subject. Quite impressive. Once upon a time, I had opportunity to read Modibo's document on law in aid of development in the days when I sought to read a bit of law. So it's quite impressive, and as a young man I was provoked by this very opinion of men of honor. But to the subject matter, when I was called upon last night that I need to partner Prof to share a few words. Though late, I said, well, it's still a good time to take opportunity as such. But from the perspective of industry, that's what I seek to add our voice, that today's space and the events playing out, it's really clear how industrialization has become the most important thing we need to drive collectively to bring about stability in this said economy and beyond. However, as much as that is well known to us from the days of Nkrumah and to today, when our current president is pushing the same agenda of industrializing, and one of the major industrialization agenda is the integration of the bauxite and aluminum industry, connecting all the dots such that we could take advantage of such resources. It's even challenged as a date. Nonetheless, our biggest concern is how do we make sure the linkages of such raw materials filter through our economy? And from the perspective of industry, when I reflect and I look out for the precious minerals, we all know the diamonds and the golds that have been the pain in the past. How many value chain companies Can you name off the street that you could say this company is into the value addition of gold or diamond? That is how it should trickle down to the economy. The said value addition of such mineral resources then become exportable products that bring in the said foreign currency. Then it takes you beyond the primary products that today we're still battling with, and to the extent that once upon a time our Bank of Ghana used to store gold, but until recently we all heard what is happening when the IMF and the rating agencies decided to take us on. Then we needed to find a way to go back to storing the reserves as a store of value to shore up our city. What went wrong? So it tells you the extent to which we've taken our eyes off the balls in integrating our precious minerals in the value chain downstream into our economy. Beyond that, one will also wonder to what extent are other forms of minerals, what are we doing in terms of the national development plan? And I was excited to see that also in the PROF's delivery, the role of the national planning in coordinating all these precious minerals. And beyond those precious minerals, today, the further discovery of lithium, clay, I had a list somewhere here, kaolin, limestone, and we know all what we could get out of these minerals. I have a logistic line, and all that we do is we mine industrial raw materials, and we haul it all the way to the gentlemen producing the various ceramic products and tiles. That is how you see the value of the said raw materials in your economy. And if by virtue of divine intervention, Kwame Nkrumah's intention of One Africa, today we have one economic market, the export of the tiles to the African market, that is the value chain. That is what will bring us stability. So the role of the national development planning in the apex of our planning, integrating our planning with our physicals. Once upon a time we used to have Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. Every region comes with its own strategy, and sometimes the planning unit becomes an aftermath. However, it becomes a party manifesto. The inability to connect the two, where the national development planning its role in cabinet is challenged. Even the planning unit discussion in the legislature, it's even challenged. I don't know whether colleagues from Parliament will tell us to what extent they have a full discourse of the national development planning's activities as a section in Parliament to coordinate the economic activities of the country. So in between Parliament, which is legislature, and Cabinet, which is executive, how strong is the role of the national development planning complementing all this effort? I bring it up and I support PROF's engagement because it becomes a unit that assists us in combining and coordinating our effort. Over the period, we've seen how difficult it is where a number of ministries work in silos, and coordination, it's a challenge. Policy inconsistency becomes a difficulty for industry to focus and then coordinate and invest. Then the doors are open, and then our foreign partners will come in. They will ask for stabilization clause to make sure that your intention of nationalization and other related issues will be defeated. So it all comes back to planning. And how strong is your planning unit in coordinating the various efforts? May I leave it here and give opportunities to my colleagues, and as the discourse goes on, we touch the fine knot and tie. Thank you.
Well, I am of the view that this is a very, very, very interesting topic, and I keep telling Prof that one of the things I'm praying for, that age will never enfeeble my mind, because that's a special gift I see about Right Honourable Speaker, that age has not enfeebled his mind. Thanks for doing justice to the topic. I'm a bit nervous when it comes to using law to achieve economic ends, because of the fact that sometimes the players on the field, they have their different economic views as to how the resources of the nation should be mobilized to achieve the results that we need. I wonder if we could have said in the Constitution that every government should be interested in free senior high school, because when you have education, it has economic dimensions over time, and whether we can converge on this because the Constitution says so. So these are very, very complex issues that we have to look at. For instance, directive principles of state policy, I mean, it gives us clues as to how the economy should be run. They are broad principles of policy, constitutionally stated, but people are questioning whether are they justiciable. Can you go to court and say that a particular government has not complied with articles so and so and so as expressed in the directive principle of state policy, and therefore the president should be impeached? He has violated the Constitution. These are matters that the laws will have to look at, because somebody might argue strongly that they are not justiciable, they are just a guide. I was very concerned about how foreigners, because of the hard fact that we are unable to use our local resources to go into minerals, and minerals investment, foreigners come in here and they siphon a lot of our monies in the name of mining. It's a very, very interesting thing that we, the members of the Mines and Energy Committee, we are very much concerned. And I thank Prof for bringing it up. You see, mining is a serious capital undertaking. And half the time, the banks in Ghana are not strong enough to say, or they are not really enough to say that, for instance, we're going to dole out about $7 million for you to do your feasibility analysis, because you know the feasibility analysis might be zero rated in the end, and you sink $7 million to try and ascertain as to whether or not there's gold in this particular area and in what quantities for you to now use to market. So these are some of the serious challenges that we have in the whole of this country. You don't have even the geological survey having come out with a serious x-ray as to what we can say here is the gold, and on the strength of the findings you could just use it to raise money. So that's the starting point. It's capital intensive and it's even risky. That is why we have a situation in which the banks won't support Ghanaians, and you need to use foreigners to come in. And eventually, if you are the concession holder, you need to, you have to give in. That if you didn't bring the money and somebody else brought the money, you'll be comfortable with 30% equity stake. The foreigner might have 70% equity stake. It's a capital challenge and it's a risky area. And I don't know how we can use the law to contain the situation. Probably we could say that irrespective of how much money you sink into a project if you're a foreigner, the Ghanaians should retain probably 40%, and then the US is 60%. But there are situations in which the Ghanaian can only retain 10%, and then the rest of it is for the foreigner. Because if you abuse your natural resources, gold and the rest of them, do not expect to improve the economy. It is the same economy that we'll have, and that's why we'll be pushed to IMF, whether you are NDC or MPP, or as CPP is evolving, we have a third force. We're waiting for CPP to evolve so that it's a third force. After all, God is the Trinity. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. So I want to just touch on one important thing, whether we should have prior approval and ratification of major economic contracts of consequence. Prof, that's a very interesting, eye-opener. Because half the time, they just dispatch a document from Jubilee House, most probably under a certificate of emergency, that this is an economic activity that the Parliament should approve. But should Parliament, especially the Finance Committee, not have a proud interrogation of that economic undertaking that the government wants to go into? It's very, 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 very interesting, because if you want ratification and you have the numbers, chances are that it will be rubber stamped without costing the full implications for the nation. We need to look at it so that we say that instead of ratification, every serious economic activity of consequence will have prior approval of Parliament. I think it is also to synchronize with the three arms of government working hand in hand to give us the optimum advantage. I believe it's a very, very important thing to say. Political elections or political auctions, and then monocracy and the rest of it, that is a minefield. Because I cannot envisage a state that is struggling to even feed the people, finding good money to finance political parties. It is going to be a very, very, very serious situation, but we need to look at it. Whether is it going to also give room for a lot of political parties to mushroom? What are the standard criteria for somebody to qualify for state funds, for him to run a political program, like trying to come to power? What are the auditing mechanisms to ensure that the state funds were not abused to entertain people? Because you realize that in politics there's a lot of entertainment. It's a very, very interesting challenge. The final thing I want to talk about is whether we should look at a situation that in the name of human rights we should have an open-ended situation of granting bail. Well, I think that is when they say discretion is vested in the courts to look at the kind of economic crime somebody has committed, and we expect a judge to exercise proper discretion in favor of the country. I'm seeing a situation in which a rehearsed, galamsey person of some foreign country, that's what she wants to do in this country, and then she's been refused bail. I saw that she has been refused bail, although Martin Pebu's authority is saying that in all circumstances bail should not be denied if the factors are right. I believe when we are being messed up economically, we also expect people who also receive their comfort from the exchequer to look at whether we should give space for people to come and mess us up, or to say that for once you will not be admitted to bail until the case is completed. I have to thank PROF for the issues that he's raised, and I think we should look at them critically. But I'm very, very nervous as whether or not we can use the instrument of the Constitution to secure some framework for economic development of the country. As to how that will be couched, that is my nervousness. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I think that my two colleagues have expressed their views on the paper presented by the Right Honorable Speaker. Now, the topic is about how we can avoid going to the IMF the 18th time, the contribution from the natural resource side in addressing our economic challenges. Prof mentioned reasons or factors that have affected our economic development over the years, and for which we have no option than to go to the fund. Some of the issues that you raised, which I put down here, talk about the economic fundamentals of our economy being very weak, the structural imbalances that we have. All these need to be discussed further. We also talk about our natural resources being in the hands of the foreigners who are actually exploiting the states. Some of the issues he also raised about the applicability of the host country's laws in contract awarding. Then political parties funding, because the states doesn't fund political parties, the political parties go their own way to look for funding, and at the end need to probably reward their financiers. And so Prof talk about the states should fund political parties. One other thing that Prof talk about is the NDPC's neutrality, and then the appointment of the members of the board by the president. The one critical one that I look at, which I want to discuss a bit, is about the taxation regime that we have in our natural resource sector. Prof gave an example of Norway, where an extraordinary tax of 78% was levied on companies in the sector. The question, however, which I wanted to discuss is, in Ghana, can it be feasible for the state to say that companies in the oil sector or in the natural resource sector to pay extra 40-50% tax, apart from the corporate tax of 25-30%? It is something that we should discuss further. Then Prof also talk about concessions, tax concessions, where these companies come and tell government that you have to give me concession for the first 5 years, the first 10 years of my operation. That we should not have these concessions. The challenge, however, will be how to attract these foreigners, how to attract this capital. Because according to my colleague, Honorable Atachian, it is difficult for the domestic markets to fund these type of projects. The banks are not willing to provide the funding for a project of this nature. So these companies come in to invest with the hope that they will recoup their investment in no time and make more profits. So if we want to prevent going to the fund in the 18th time, the fund, actually, when we go to the fund next year, it will take us like 3 years. So 2023, 2024, 2025, probably we'll go out of the fund in 2026. Then we'll wait for 4 or 5 years before we go again. Because if you look at the fund that we went in 2015, we came out of the fund in 2018. That was 3 years. So 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 4 years, and we are thinking of going to the fund, or we are going to the fund again, which means that the period that we can only live on our own without support from the fund is 4 years, maximum 5 years. So in order to prevent going to the fund in 2029 or 2030, we need to address all the issues raised by Prof in the paper to be able to have a contribution from the natural resource sector towards prevention of going to the fund. I think that this need to be discussed further, and we'll probably need some view from you also. So I thank you very much, Prof, for the opportunity to make a comment on this matter.
Okay, we now open it to the floor. So anyone who wants to go first?
The oil and gas sector, AGI, and also chairman of the Political Affairs Committee of the CPP. I take it that we all sitting here, we are not going partisan colors. We're trying to build Ghana, the nation. I have two inquiries. The first one is this. This is 960 pages of the Fiajo Constitutional Review Report. 960 pages. When you read it, some of the things you're talking about here are in this document. Are we throwing it away? Is it part and parcel of what we want? Number two, I was part of the team that drafted the extractive sector of the 40-year National Development Plan. And most of the minerals you're talking about, they are all in there. We put together strategies, how we need to extract, how we build capacity in Ghanaians, how we get Ghanaian companies on board to make sure that we are not only looking at foreign companies coming in. Is that one? Are we also catapulting that one? So I want to know, these two documents, how do they help in the excellent presentation that Prof gave? How does that become part and parcel of looking at how we look at our extractive sector? Thank you.
I would like to add briefly comments by and first of all to thank Prof for his very insightful speech. One of the things he may have referred to, since we are privileged to have him still very vibrant at that age, in terms of talking about tightening of the screws and natural resources. And since he himself is a natural resource, a natural human resource, there's a particular screw in the Constitution which insists that professors should retire at 60. It's also a very peculiar provision to me, because for me, professors are probably at the height of their game when they are 60. That is when they can stand before an audience without their notes and speak freely on the subject matter and engage their students in discourse. A very critical component of the Constitution, which will be allowed to remain there for quite some time. But we're speaking about, obviously, a different natural resource today. And I'd like to put a question to the chair of today's occasion, because when she was being introduced, she was also introduced as the chairman of Newmont Mining, a very difficult task. And Newmont were one of the companies, and it has occurred both under, even though this is a non-partisan discussion, both under the MPP and the NDC. I'm sure the first time it happened, Professor OQUAYE, you may have been in Parliament at that time. That was under the presidency of His Excellency John Ajekun Kufuor, when, presumably as Atachia said, under a certificate of emergency, Newmont stability levy provisions were brought to Parliament, and I think instead of paying 5% royalties because of the stabilization levy, it was brought down to about 2 to 2.5%. Similarly, under the National Democratic Congress, despite a committee headed by the eminent Professor Soya explaining the dangers of what was going to occur for Goldfields Ghana, it was also stabilization levy reduced, the royalties were reduced. The question I have is, although that was not prior approval, but rather ratification, why did we never hear members of the legislature at that time stating that despite the certificate of emergency, they would not ratify?
Yes, Sheikh, then Prof. Edwidaso.
Thank you very much. And let me also associate myself with the quality of the presentation. And thank you so much, Prof. Of late, what has been bothering my mind in the context of the larger economic downturn and the quest to really find solution to this problem. Question: the oil that has been found in our country, I began asking, has it been a blessing to us? How much have we been gaining from it? And are we able to estimate from then to now how much oil of benefit, economic benefit to our country? As a small boy, I lived in Takwa, so I was close to Takwa, Prestia, Bogoso, Obuasi. These are all mining towns. I lived in Takwa and I saw how deplorable the condition is. But I would tell you, under Galamsey, you see vast development in that area, structural-wise. So I'm asking for clear scenarios where those constitutional lacuna or gaps have given rise to colossal economic loss, that when we appreciate without doing the politics, we can understand that we must all come together and do the constitutional reform that will lead us to this kind of economic liberation. I have myself with my good brother Gentua. Tens of thousands of dollars was expended by a government to do constitutional reform. What is the constraining factor? What is that restrains us from applying those reforms as germane as they are? What is it? So these are my two things, but I want to see, by way of estimate, how far have we lost so much economically from the economic gaps that we are now seeking to address? Thank you.
Yes, Prof. Edwidaso.
Very much, Dr. Dakwa. I think this is a very important topic, and has done good job. Also, all the issues he raised are issues that are bothering us over the years. But it is clear the systemic hiccups we are getting is because we, as you rightly put it, we're divorcing our development from institutionalism and constitutionalism. And when we have, because we are having this, because especially our system, the political system, is heavily monetized. We have the deep state syndrome. And it's seriously problematic for us because of the monetization of our political system. Yesterday I encountered the minority leader in parliament in my school, give us a paper, and he was very candid about that he estimated that to become a parliamentarian you need not less than about $1 million. And he joked that a good professor like me sitting by his right will never get that $1 million. He joked about that, but it wasn't a joke. Really, I can't imagine. I've taught more than 35 years in the university system, but I can't afford to become a parliamentarian, let alone a presidential candidate. So the monetization is a big problem for us. And when you begin to monetize politics, you have this deep state syndrome, and the patronage system comes in. Then you are divorced completely from institutionalism and constitutionalism. The constitutionalist aspect that the professor was telling us about is very, very important, because then nothing works.
our institutions are not working. Let me hone in on this NDPC matter, the National Development Planning Commission. Yesterday we talked about that also. I'm wondering why, like the professor is saying, the place is loaded with politicians instead of technocrats. Two, why whatever they come out with is not binding as our blueprint for development. You take the history of Doha and Dubai, and if you check some 20-30 years back, they were just like Accra, and yet they had a blueprint for development, and they followed it to the letter. Now, my brother Jantua, why we want to jettison that document, but you yourself came out, the NDPC came out to say it's not binding. If it is not, then what do we do? My take on this is that the place should be loaded with only technocrats, people you can insult us, but it's book people. We don't know book, don't go there. People who will research, know the minerals we have, their value, whatever it is, know the deficits we have in the economy, and plan towards their liquidation. For example, if we have 2 million housing deficit in Ghana, and the NDPC feels that from our resources, it can be liquidated in 5-10 years. Then the political parties rather go there to write their manifestos from those documents. They don't write manifestos to say they can take the sea to Kumasi when it is not in the NDPC document. That's what I'm advocating. I'm advocating a system where the blueprint of Ghana is made by the NDPC, and political parties go there to take to write their manifestos from the blueprint and tell me that NDPC says we can reach so and so by 5 years, but I will do it in 4 years. Then the NDC says I'll do it in 1 year. NPP says I'll do it in 3 years. Then we make a choice rather than they telling us what they would do, even though it's not like it's not in any kind of development. Basically, to the minerals. Yes, again there, if we don't have any system, if we don't have any data on them and planning on them, and we leave it freely, that's exactly what will happen, because the political system is already corrupted. Then that aspect also is going to be corrupted. The UN sent us to Eritrea some time back, few years back, and what I saw there, our report was very solid, but they wanted to take away the sanctions they had on them, and our report was solid. The Afwerki met us and spoke to us, and I was convinced. And we went to some of the mines far away, so dangerous a road, and we saw what it was Australian mines, Australian companies. It's clear the man is saying, I have this thing underground, I can't exploit it, but it is money, so it is my collateral, kind of. So if you come, you want to exploit it, you are bringing the money. Other than that, it will be a waste. So yours is 60%, mine is 40%, and that is the law. Every exploitation of anything in Eritrea is 60-40. But we don't have a situation like that, so that, I mean, anybody comes and we are talking about Parliament rubber stamping 2%, 3%. I mean, come on, give me a break. Give me a break. And I think the African minerals, whatever it is, and then we have one for West Africa also. It's clear. I think one company came here, I remember Kufuor's time, and we were bargaining, I've forgotten which company it was. I think also Australia. And we were bargaining for 10%, whatever it is, and they were angry. They left here, went to Mali, and they are paying there 4%. If we have this kind of multilateral kind of agreement, say in West Africa or Africa, they wouldn't be moving from one country to another to exploit. So let's take most of the things that Prof has said very seriously over here. And my last point is on the constitutional order, which Professor Fiajo has this very big book, and when we're reading, we don't stop, because almost every one leads to another. My take on this is that every aspect of the Constitution, some people have something against. So that's why you have a voluminous thing like that. Everything had to be amended or restructured and that kind of thing. Why don't we get a commission of eminent persons? The professors are there, constitutionalists, to rewrite a new constitution for us, so that we don't bicker about this one has to be this one has to be this. Rewrite a new constitution, we adopt it, and we move ahead. That does not lead us into the Fifth Republic. We are still in the Fourth Republic. We are only changing and continuing. Thank you so much.
That I want to go way back. I think we are talking as intellectuals.
each one of us, if we go and live in the communities we grew up, let's make a meaning to them. How do we expect them to contribute to the things we're talking about? Try and get any person to register a company as we expect them to do. And even fill the forms. I'm a lawyer. He tried to register a company and I was frustrated. I looked at the document and I was, why do I need to go through all these? Because we still think like how we were brought up, colonialist. We have not learned to simplify even the basic things. We want to copy. We're still copying. I regret to observe. Now, Prof, Mr. Speaker, let's ask ourselves, if all the gold under Ghana were brought out and put out in our streets, what will we do with them? We will at best sell them as they are. And yet, before the colonialists came, we are craftsmen that were using the gold to create things. How did we lose all that? This is taking me to the kind of education we have followed all this while. God has blessed us with a lot. The earth for growing food in abundance, minerals of all kinds. But nobody wants to touch that. Our educational system takes us away from the wealth of our land. Anybody who leaves second doesn't want to work on the land. I think that if we truly want to develop our country, we should go back and retrain, retool. Because looking at myself, I think that yes, I can speak English, but beyond that, I'm practically useless for my community. Beyond that, I can speak English and I can point to the law in the book. I'm not useful to the people I represent. What value do they get from me personally? And how did the school system train me to be useful to the community? I think it is time we looked at the educational system we have built again. That's my first observation. The second one is that integrity. We don't talk about it, but it is the biggest and major challenge we have as a country. Our resources are not enough, but from the budget allocation through to the end, a large chunk of the money we allocate doesn't do the things we set them to do. First thing, revenue. I practiced as a lawyer for about 15 years before I came to public service. I'm not sure I would be able to account for my income because we run such an informal system. Your client meets you in court, he gives you money, put it in your pocket. By the time you get to the office, you spend half of it. No receipts are issued. How do you account? My mother sells rice. She takes her money, puts it in her head, and let's say she goes back to buy. How do we account through the system we have set out to determine profit and to pay tax on? So the informal systems are, I think, the systems which we should redevelop so that people can contribute to the state. But beyond that, I'm saying that any value I hold, I learned from either my mother or my father. The state has not put any value in me beyond teaching me to read and write. What are the national values we espouse? At least I was lucky. I learned a promise of my honor. But the younger ones today are not learning anything. We are not teaching them any values. And yet we expect them to behave like at least those of us who had the basics well. So I suggest that these constitutional amendments and things we are talking about are way too high above the heads of the everyday people who expect to assist. You plan the program and you send it there. Nobody understands or has the patience to read even your policy to implement them. I think we should look two things: rebuild the integrity base and revamp our educational system. people must be trained to work with their hands. There's too much literal learning. It's not helping anybody. I thank you.
OQUAYE, Executive Director for Center for Natural Resources and Environmental Management. Yeah. Honorable, as we met yesterday to discuss this program, I made my view very clear that using the Constitution to screw protection of natural resources is not the only answer to the situation. But the laws we pass to govern the exploitation of these resources, which most of the time we call a physical regime. My brother here talked about the oil. The professor here talked about Eritrea, where they practice what we call mineral production sharing agreement, where it's 60 for the nation, for the capital, the investors, and 40 for the nation. In that practice, what is practiced is the total output is that is shared. If, let's say, gold, 5 tons of gold was produced, the nation will take 40% of that total without anything. Then the investors take 60%. Now let's come to oil. It is the oil we have lost on gold, diamond, bauxite, and over the decades. And now we have our oil. If our oil was properly managed and the appropriate laws or the fiscal regime was adopted, please, we will not be in this crisis. Now, the president sometimes said, now I'm telling you, all of you here, to tell the president that why am I saying so? Yet it is but I am saying, all of you, tell the president that I am saying that why am I saying so? It's because we have not properly managed our oil resources for the past 10 years. If you all remember, before we started the oil production, workshops were held across the whole Ghana, soliciting views from Ghanaians as to how we were going to manage the first $5 billion from Jubilee Fields. Am I right? Now, after 10 years of Jubilee Fields, we have not made the $5 billion.
Yeah, please, you may wind up. Please, you may wind up.
So, this is where we are. We must revisit the hybrid system that we are practicing.
Now, I will tell you that we have generated, Jubilee Fields has generated $23.304 billion for the 10 years. And we have only earned $4.735 billion from the 23.304 billion. Why? Yeah, so I'll wind up. So I should wind up. So would stop here. This is I need a bigger forum.
Oh, yes.
To talk about this.
Yeah, please take it to Kojo. Thank you. Yeah, Kojo. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Kojo Yankson. I'm not a lawyer or a lawmaker. I'm a journalist, which means my only powers here are to observe and ask questions. So I've observed something, I want to ask a question. I was particularly struck when Reverend Professor spoke about the role of the National Development Planning Commission. So I took a quick look at Articles 86 and 87 in the Constitution. I realized that it speaks of a National Development Planning Commission, talks about how it should be made up and what its functions should be. It occurred to me, this is the observation, it occurred to me that perhaps if our Constitution rather said there shall be a National Development Plan and not a commission, a plan, so that every government would first of all have to ensure that a plan exists, and it would also then be unconstitutional for a government to not follow that plan. So that no matter how much power a president has, all of his discretion will be limited to how he pursues the National Development Plan. And of course, that document, if it already existed, we would have a little less need for a commission. Yes, they will have a role to play, but it wouldn't be the sort of establishment that every new government would have to come and repopulate, give them a new task to set up a new plan on a different rolling year period, which will then be abandoned by the next government, and then we start at square one. If the Constitution rather could be amended to simply say National Development Plan, and that everyone is bound by it, perhaps we might even be able to get away with not amending the whole Constitution. Because if the plan is comprehensive enough and it covers how our resources are to be allocated, how deals are to be struck, if it gives limitations to what kind of agreement Parliament can even consider, perhaps that might be one giant step forward in protecting the value of our natural resources. And then we can take our time over the next decades to figure out what to do about the Constitution itself, while our resources at least have some form of guidance on how, as a nation, we can deploy them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Haruna Mohammed. I'm from the NPP. I want to make a suggestion with regards to the point that was made with regards to funding of political parties, where Prof had mentioned that we should look at state funding of political parties as one of the solutions to where we are today, to avoid us going to the IMF for the 8th time. I would want to suggest that we look at the establishment and the functions that is put in the Political Parties Act. The Political Parties Act has restricted political parties to do business on their own. As a result of that, how income comes into the political parties for them to use it to manage the political party that they establish becomes very difficult. And I tend to have a problem with state funding political parties, whether it is going to be feasible. But we should be looking at how we would be able to amend the Political Parties Act to allow political parties to do legitimate business on their own, to be able to use that to participate in funding their activities as they go on. The second one I want to also suggest is that Doc had made a very fantastic submission with regards to us packing the NDPC with good people. However, if we are able to pack them there and we don't back the will to implement the decisions of these good professors, I think that they would also sit there for a long time, and policies that they would develop would be nothing to all of us. So let's look at the functionality of the NDPC that is backed by law, that the decisions of the NDPC will inure to the benefit of the state Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think
Thank you very much. My name is Theodore Kofi Markham, Senior Fellow, Institute of Economic Affairs. There are many issues, but let me take only one angle. I'm very passionate about it. We are here dealing with depletable resources. That is, after some time, all the gas, the oil, the minerals will get finished. Here we are. We have an ambitious but a doable industrialization policy. We also have a national export development strategy, all meant to change the economic structure of this country. We move away from the Gadgetsburg and we have complete structural transformation. At the time that this country is in full gear with industrialization, if we don't take care, the minerals, the oil, the gas will get finished. So we should, as soon as possible, leverage our resources for national development. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess just a few remarks. Let me begin by apologizing. These are not normal times for us, and I've had to be chairing some rather tumultuous meetings. The Honorable Aviji and his health are not allowing me to sleep. So I have to be very proactive. But I think that I caught just the tail end of some of the observations that were coming from the floor, not the substantive presentation by the main speaker. I agree with what ought to be done with respect to our mineral resources, because if you're not careful and do not plan and strategize, by the time we come to, our resources will be gone. Today, thankfully, we have discovered iron ore in sufficient quantities to be able to mine and sieve it in such a manner that it will be useful to us. Growing up, we used to know of the iron ore reserves at Opomansi. The recent discovery at Shenyi, for instance, is more than 10 times what is at Opomansi. In the region of about 1.8 billion tons. And certainly, if we're able to get it off, it will really help us to reposition Ghana as an industrialized country. But while we are at it, our manganese ore is being shipped out by China for a pittance. They are not paying anything to us. Manganese is still leaving our shores. They are not paying anything to us. And they just load them in trucks, go and deposit them in waiting ships and take them away. There's no way we are able to even measure what quantities are leaving our shores. And where they have to situate the trucks in order for us to know the quantities that are leaving. I believe that somebody's instance is being spoiled for more than 4 years, 5 years. And nobody's watching that. We need the manganese to harden the steel that eventually we'll be able to produce. And you know what China is doing? For now, they've just cleared a vast place close to in the Guangzhou province. They are depositing in there for future use. So it's leaving Ghana at a pittance. That is why I believe that we need to really have a serious look at our mining and minerals laws. When we discovered oil in sufficient quantities, we were about to pump the oil up. When we came to crafting the Petroleum Resources Management Act, I insisted that, look, let's confine ourselves to just 2 or 3 areas so that when the resource gets depleted, we'll be able to look beyond and behind our shoulders to tell ourselves that this is what we use the money for. Parliament did not agree with me. And we allowed the finance minister to have 12 areas of application. Today, if we probe into it, we get to know that vast amounts, huge amounts, are being utilized for, to service, service delivery in the country. What are we doing to ourselves? I was insistent that, look, since the departure of the colonialists, we not managed to add 1 inch to our rail track. Assuming we determined to use this on the construction of railways, 10 years. By now, we're talking to ourselves that, we've been able to reconstruct Accra to Kumasi Takoradi. Today, we are looking for investors coming to invest about 4 billion to realign and reconstruct just the Accra-Kumasi rail track. We don't have money, so we're looking to enter into some kind of PPP arrangement for them. They come, build, operate, and transfer, BOT, after a certain time. That's where we are. I keep insisting that the overall mission for our national development agenda is set out in the directive principles of state policy. It's there. And I agree that the NDPC it is that really should fashion this out from the vision established by the directive principle of state policy. Unfortunately, the very composition of the NDPC does not lend itself to opposing political parties. And let's not forget, the NDPC itself is responsible just to the president, the incumbent president, not to even parliament, the representative of the people. That is where the deficit is. Let's look at the composition. The other day, I was talking about, I was likening the product of NDPC, regardless of whatever they do, to a chamber pot. My wife has told me that I should not be using that analogy again. But it's like a chamber pot. Regardless of whether it's coming directly from the factory, if it's given to you to eat from, you will decline. That is it. So what Professor Jambafo and J.H. Mensah started doing was a very good document. It was jettisoned by the NDC. And then they brought Kosiboche, Nimoy Thompson. What they did, I must admit, was a vast improvement on what J.H. and Professor Jambafo did. Why is it that the MPP doesn't want to have anything to do with it? Because it's like a chamber pot. They are now trying to...
Tell your wife about this.
This is the last time. This is the last time I'm irritated. And you being a Jehovah's Witness, if this one gets to the ears of my wife. So, look, we need to be serious with ourselves. We need to be serious with ourselves. There are many things. There are so many things, so many deficits and deficiencies in the Constitution. I don't want us to be tinkering with the Constitution. Let's do a holistic. The Constitution by, I think Article, is it, what is it, 257? 257. Check 257, I think 257.6. 257.6. Of those. So the benefit the state does not benefit in any way. Meanwhile, the degradation has to be attended to by the state. So please, let's call the spade a spade. If an individual benefits, yes, what they are doing now is glorified theory. I'm not sure that we should glorify it again. So let's look comprehensively at all facets of the Constitution, so that we do a holistic review. What Professor Mel started with is good. It provides a very useful beginning for us. But it is not enough, we must admit. Let's build on that. Do a very comprehensive analysis of it. And then, if we have to have a referendum, to be just one referendum on that new document that will be produced. So that we don't have to be doing one referendum, one Y, one D, 1 year, one referendum. we need to move beyond that. So let's do what is right. If not believe that we are gathering enough goodwill, and I guess we can carry the state with us once we do this. As for populating the NDPC with technocrats, I 100% subscribe to that. That's what we have to do. So many things that in the Constitution. The other day I was talking to my colleagues. We were talking about the EC, so much bitter about the EC. I said, oh, okay, the foot is on the other side. Now you are crying. When it was the other side, nobody raised the issue. The composition of the electoral commission. If you have to look at it, the constitutional review, how to set it up. Because it could ignite fire in this country. The creation of constituencies. let's not forget, at the beginning of the Fourth Republic, we had 140 constituencies. Just 4 months before the conduct of the elections, 60 more were created. And we know the interest that it was to say. From 140 to 200, 200 to 230, and then 230 to 275. How can this continue? What we are doing does not exist anywhere in the established democracies. But then, the political party that is governing, when it's done under the regime, that gerrymandering that they resort to, they are laughing. Today, my colleagues on the other side, they are afraid, hey, the electoral commission is going to create some other constituencies. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't have happened, and it shouldn't happen now. My own thinking is that we didn't need, even though the 200 was even too bloated figures, let's live with it. We didn't need to increase to 230, much less 275. We're thinking of whether we should go to 300 or 350. Is it worth it? China should be increasing their constituencies in every and they don't do that. Canada is now bringing down the number of constituencies in the system. The fact that the electoral commission is given the responsibility to recreate boundaries just means that you should collapse some of the boundaries. For instance, population now is drifting to Tafadi, where oil has been discovered. It's not only oil. Cocoa production has moved to the Western region, the totality of the Western region. Gold production has moved there. So what else? So population setting will drift. That's it. In that case, if democracy is about representation of people by people, then that region should have many more constituencies. And from Ashanti, where the drift is moving, then maybe Ashanti will have some fewer constituencies. Or from the north, fewer constituencies. We are looking at the graphical spread. Afarijan was asked a simple question: what's the population quota of this country? And he kept on. And yet the Constitution provides that the constituencies should have as near as possible same number of people, because it's representation of people by people, not representation of trees by people, or of rivers by people, or of landmass by people. So let's be serious with ourselves. And I guess if we are frank and restore some integrity into our body politic and indeed into our individual physical constitutions, we'll do what is right to serve this country. Thank you very much.
Are we throwing away the Fiadio Committee report? Definitely not. And the good thing about research is that you must always make literature review an essential part of the exercise. It will give you what works and be prior written, and what you are doing now, and how what you are doing will benefit the store of knowledge. And that's exactly what the IEA is doing. And we don't intend to reinvent anything. But it's important for us to know that there are still areas that need to be considered. If you look at that report very well, not only copy but copies of which I have, you'll see, for example, that they gave the president an elastic opportunity to choose from wherever he wants, whether from parliament or from outside parliament, rather than saying that the majority must come from parliament. But those who are saying that none must come from parliament at all are telling you they don't accept this. Why? Because the dichotomy will be beneficial in that the MPs will be able to control parliament better when they are, the executive better when they are not part of the executive at all. That may be accepted, it may not, but at least it is a differential. The issue of neutral National Development Planning Committee, which actually we have appeared to have come to consensus over this evening was also left mainly to the presidency to choose. We've often assumed one thing, that, oh, the chief executive will be a good man, he will not do this, he will not do that, and so on and so forth. I remember very well in the Nkrumah regime, a member of parliament who said, do you think a good man like Nkrumah can detain anybody wrongly? You know, no man is good. Let us be ruled by the law, including me. Yes. So that we are ruled by the law, and then we save ourselves the trouble. It was a good man who said that men can be corrupted, and that then they have absolute power. They can be corrupted rather very absolutely. So we're still looking at all these areas, and with the experiences, watering down executive power. The issue of political party funding has assumed more importance in recent years, and I've heard the minority leader and others, and I like how he's nodding his head, making very serious references to this development. And I think that we must capture it by all means, because this monocracy will really defeat democracy if we don't look at it very, very well. It appears also it is a general consensus also. So there are many areas that we can perhaps do better in. We take it that all these are really good contributions, and we very much appreciate if some of you would take the trouble to just put into writing some of your further suggestions. If that's how I look at them, basically, all towards enriching the discourse that we've all had here. And with this, let us note, for example, that in certain countries, you will find billboards. I live in Britain, I know it very well. No billboards are there when they are having elections. What's the use of all those billboards? Build big boards. So that it becomes money. The law must ban it. The law must control certain things. All these t-shirts, you find it in America. We are going to have elections, so we must print t-shirts and put people's heads there. These are very, very important developments. All these mammoth rallies, people travel from the north to come to a rally in Accra as part and parcel of the political process. Do they do that in the established democracies? In fact, it's time for us to examine ourselves so that we reduce cost. You see only printed papers that are put at doors and so on and so forth. We must bring our politics within our means and make it reasonably cheap. Good people will emerge because the people know those people who are good enough to represent them, and so on and so forth. And in any case, the big rallies don't promote good people necessarily. So we should examine, for example, political party expenditure at the intra-party level, that is, as they do their primaries, and then at the inter-party level, as they compete among themselves. And we will see that there will be very limited expenditure if we turn the screws on and control the process, which can be done. And it is being done in those countries that we go to borrow money from. With this, I will thank you for attending the
So I think, thank you very much. Now, you know, this is getting very interesting, but we seem to be also moving further and further away from the main topic. And I think it's very useful for us in order to structure the sort of things that we need to move our nation forward in this democratic dispensation, or in a democratic dispensation, we need to structure some of these so that we can take them topic by topic and deal with them for solutions. One thing I know is that as Ghanaians, we love to talk. That one is one of the things that we major in. But all talk must end with a solution. Otherwise, we will not even be sitting here discoursing on some of these issues. Let's try and find solutions to some of the perennial problems that keep, us in cycles of up and down. Our development seems to be moving up and then suddenly it's down again. We need to put an end to it. And let me say that sometimes we say posterity will hold us accountable. It is the truth. A lot of us living now will be held very much accountable for the way things have gone. Let's put some seriousness into it. The topic says Ghana beyond the 17th IMF. What are the things that we can use our natural resources for an enduring development? The kind of enduring development that will enable us to take care of our own development issues and not always go running for help. For years that I can remember, our balance of payment gap has been wide. At first, the donors were filling in. I think about 30 years ago, it was 60-40. We had 40, they had to provide 60. And then it dwindled a little bit. But it's because the gap is still there. That's why we're even going for support. How do we make sure that we can meet our basic development needs and have relationships with other countries that will be mutually beneficial? That's where we should be going. I mean, it would be nice for Norway to say what it's saying because they can afford to say it. But can we even afford to say that some of the things that the Norwegian professor was talking about, we can't? Why do we have so much foreign domination in our natural resource sector? A number of things I'll mention. One, even sufficient information on the explored minerals available is not there. And so a company has to come and do the exploration and then sell the information to those who have money to do the exploitation. That's number one. We need to deal with that. Even the oil exploration, isn't that still the case? Still the case. The lithium too, somebody else has to really determine the quantity. Iron, we have to determine the quantity that we have. If we knew the quantity, we ourselves could go and negotiate with even banks outside to give us the money to do it. So exploration of our natural resources, our mineral resources, is critical. We need to make sure that we consider the benefits important enough for us to resource the Ghana, what do they call them again? The geological survey. Geological survey. We need to resource them to have the information available, because if we did, they don't have any resources at all. Because if we did, then we could take our whatever natural resource we do, we know over the number of years how much we're going to make out of it. And then even if you're a foreigner and you come, we deal with it on our terms, not on their terms. Great Newmont, at the time they were coming, The country was in dire straits, and so a company bringing $500,000 in for investment seemed to be, a company that should be, how shall I say it, pampered. That needs to be pampered. Now, because of Professor Akila Basoya, the rate for paying the royalties is tied to the cost of gold per ounce. So now everybody is paying 5%, instead of 3% and 5% and so on. But these are some of the things that we need to resolve. We have talked, it's beautiful. The second thing, I've talked about exploration. You have a resource, you don't know how much of it you have, you can't properly negotiate as to how it should be exploited and what you will benefit therefrom. Number 2, as I said, Ghana is preponderantly gold, but gold, let's face it, it does not downstream well. Even when you're talking about our goldsmiths and so on, even if we had all the goldsmiths, how many of us can afford gold as jewelry? Because goldsmiths do jewelry, So even there, we need to find a better way of using the gold, and I think we need to store much of the gold as wealth. We need to store much of the gold as wealth for the nation, and then do the little downstreaming that we can do. It would be nice, of course, in Obuasi to have a gold street, so that anybody who visits Obuasi can go there and purchase gold, knowing that it's authentic. Have a gold street in Takwa, that can be done. And then even have a gold street in Accra because it's capital. We should be doing something like that, so that yes, some kind of downstreaming can go on. Right now, we have built a refinery, but we need certification from the London Gold something. Yes, and until you have it, you can't even sell your gold. It's crazy. It's really crazy. So the thing is that do you put up your refinery before you go find the certification? What do? And then you ask yourself, even with the certification, how much gold can you refine, and who are you going to sell it to? South Africa has one of the largest refineries. They are operating a third of the capacity. And now even suffering more because countries like Dubai are also refining. Where do they get the gold? All of us will be able to, will sell under the table and so on, India is still the largest buyer of gold for jewelry, These are all things we need to sort out, so that as a small country, we will determine just how best we can maximize the benefits. We don't have to have a refinery because everybody has it. We don't have to do certain things because everybody does it. But the one thing we must do, buy the gold and keep the gold in country and use it as a reserve to generate wealth. So it's very important that we do. The third thing, we need a lot of professionals in the field. Yes, we have mining engineers and so on, but that is after the fact. What about others before the fact? We need to train people. I don't know how many people who are trained in the kind of mining law that will serve our interests when we are negotiating some of these minerals, to those who come to exploit our minerals. We need that kind of thing. People, and even in the oil field, how many people have we trained who can really think beyond what the people who are coming to exploit? Read their minds and be able to know exactly where we can make the best profit. There's so much that we need to do. And I like your intervention about the kind of education we're having. For as long as we let people think that akrachism is what makes us a people, everybody would want to be kratchi. We even call agriculture kratchi, and we call cocoa kratchi. So being a kratchi is very important to everybody. And you will find farmers telling their children not to become farmers because that doesn't add value to their lives. Even though I can tell you that Akrachi for P, they don't have anything. They don't have anything, you know? And so we need a kind of mindset that will change our thinking. Wealthy people in Europe are mainly farmers. Mainly farmers. These are the wealthy people. And there's no reason why we cannot do that in our own country. But let me, maintain my stand on the minerals resources. Should we not cap how much gold we want to mine so that we can mine other things? Since they will lend themselves more readily to the development agenda. If clay will give us the best, limestone can be made into clinker, but how much limestone do we have? So why are we still building with cement when we can build with clay? Do you get me? Why is it that we think that it is when you have painted your house that it is a house, when you can be using stone and bricks to do the house? What are the kind of laws? What are the kind of laws that will limit our use of some of these things? So these are some of the things that we should think about when we're talking natural and mineral resources. Because frankly, if you consider the amount of clay that abounds in this country, we really should be building with a lot of bricks. Some of it you can even do in situ because of the kind of laterite we have. You add just a little bit and you're good to go. We need to think natural resources beyond gold, beyond manganese, beyond iron, and so on, unless we're thinking of these as the focal points of making money to store as wealth, so that we can plow them back into some of the ones that lend themselves so readily to our development agenda. And we who are the educated, we seem to be causing more problems because we love to talk. We love to talk, and we the educated are not making it easy for people to recognize that they too can be major players in the development agenda. Some of the political parties are even now requiring maybe certain the chiefs sitting here. Some of you are even requiring a certain level of maybe second degree before you can become something or the other. Yeah, So if you take local government, for example, how are we going to allow people properly from the local communities to determine some of these things, And what should the local government do about the resources in their communities, even though it is vested in the president for everybody? If a local government structure does not even know, as they are telling us they don't know, and that's why Galamsey is going on, If you're sitting somewhere and you are the MC and you don't even know the minerals in your own community, are you worth being, There are a number of things that we need to do. Let us focus on maximizing our minerals. I mean, we have been given a lot. Knowledge of what we have and how we can use them to develop is very important. the kind of upstream things, what are the equipment that we need to mine what we need. That too has to be developed. And this is where maybe the iron ore and steel and so on will come in. So we'll begin producing some of these things. Why the Chinese here? They'll bring some equipment and they make sure that everything is written in Chinese. So you will have to bring the interpreter and so on. By the time you know, so they come in droves. At our invitation, none of them is here without our invitation because they come to work for us. Why did manganese, where government had 20%, and bauxite, that government had 20% instead of the 10 in gold, how come it was never discussed so that even those who run the manganese company will be in our favor? We have a lot of work to do. The decisions are in Parliament, they are in with the executive, and definitely with the judiciary, because the law has to work. This is the time that the three arms of government should work together. Let me say this. And CSOs, thank you. Let me say this also. CSOs are supposed to also provide the kind of, you know, impetus that will make the three arms of government work well. Let's make sure we do so. There's only one Ghana. Only one Ghana. You can go to the UK, they will still call you a Ghanaian British. See what they did to Kwesi Kwarteng, a British of Ghanaian descent. Yes, you go to America, you're a Ghanaian American. You go to Germany, you are a Ghanaian German. So why don't we stay here and make our country good enough? We will visit them. We will share what we know with them. We will also take what they have and we come and do our country good. All the time. You know, Ghana's problems will be solved by us. Us. Nobody is interested. That's why they will, you know, move you to go to IMF. Because you make money for them. Yeah. Bottom line. You have everything, as he said, but because of our own thinking. So let's think right. Let's move this debate or this discussion further, and let's focus on mineral resources. Let's focus on mineral resources. Take it to a certain logical conclusion. How the Constitution can be used to maximize the benefits. I'm grateful for being the chair. It's been wonderful sitting in the chair, and I pray that the conclusions have been useful. Thank you all very much and have a wonderful evening. Oh, I want it nicely.